Today we're reading the last chapter of Owls in the Family by Farley Mowat. This is chapter 11. The spring when Weeps and Wool became 3 years old was a very sad spring for me. My father had taken a new job, so we had to leave Saskatoon and go east to the big Ontario city of Toronto. There'd be no more sloughs, no more gophers, no bluffs, and worst of all, no prairies in Toronto. I hated the idea of moving, but most of all, I hated leaving my friends behind me, both my human and my animal friends. We couldn't take Weeps and Wool because they'd have to spend their days locked up in a cage, and that would have been cruel. On the other hand, we couldn't just turn them loose either, because they had been members of our human family for so long they wouldn't be able to look out for themselves. All we could do was try to find someone who would give them a new home. I talked to most of my chums about this, and they all said they would be willing to take my owls, but their parents wouldn't hear of it. Then one day I thought of Bruce. He and his family had moved away from Saskatoon a while earlier and were running a fox farm about 200 miles to the northwest. I sat down and wrote Bruce a letter, and a few days later I got this reply. Dear Billy, it's pretty good here. There are lots of ducks, and we've started the fox farm and got lots of pups. Dad says, sure, I can have the owls. We have an old fox pen I'm fixing up to keep them, and I'm building a wood house in it to keep them warm. Rex is healthy and says hello to Mutt and says bring Mutt up here for a visit when you come with the owls. There's a lot of Indians here, and I go to school with a lot of real Indian kids. When you come, I'll take you there, and you can ride some of their horses. So long, your old pal Bruce. I showed the letter to my father. Sounds fine, Billy, he said. What do you say we drive the owls up to Bruce's place on Friday afternoon and stay over for a visit until Sunday night? I said, yes, of course, and that's what we did. It was a wonderful trip to Bruce's. The sloughs were full of water, and the water was covered with ducks resting on their way north. We saw prairie chickens dancing on the side of the road, and there were more meadowlarks and red-tailed hawks than you could shake a stick at. The owls rode with me and Mutt in the rumble seat, and they had a wonderful time. When we got to the farm, Bruce's mother had a big feed for us. On Saturday, Bruce took me to the Indian reservation to meet his pals. One of them, a boy about my age named Harry Wildhawk, loaned me a cayuse, and the three of us rode all over the prairie that day, chasing coyotes and jackrabbits on horseback. On Sunday, Bruce and I stayed around the farm to help him finish off the cage for Wool and Weeps, where they would sleep at night. It was sad business, though, because I kept wishing Saturday could have gone on forever. Wool and Weeps didn't seem to suspect anything. I think they were having too much fun to be suspicious. Wool went off and explored the big poplar bluffs behind the fox farm. And then he walked all around the fox cages, hooting at the foxes, daring them to start something. Weeps found his way to the meat house, where the fox food was ground up in a big mincing machine, and the hired man fed Weeps so many scraps he could hardly walk at all. Sunday night, we put the two owls in their cage. Weeps was asleep almost before I could turn the catch on the door, but all of a sudden Wool seemed to sense that something was wrong. He gave a funny sort of a hoot, then he jumped over the door and put his head against the wire mesh. I reached down and tickled him behind his horns for a minute, and he seemed to think things were all right again. He climbed back up on his perch and fluffed out his feathers for the night. I said, goodbye, old owls. You look after each other. Someday maybe I'll be back. And that's the end. There is a note from the author here that I'm going to go ahead and read to you too. Were Wool's and Weeps real owls? Of course they were. And Mutt and Rex and Murray and Bruce and I were real. If you should happen to be going to Saskatoon in the spring of the year, if you should happen to take a walk across the prairie, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if you happen to meet some of us. And if it's a big white owl and a not so big brown owl you meet, give them my love, will you? Isn't that cool? I hope you liked this story.